The Anguished Man painting a portrait of evil. The rain hammered against the old attic window, tapping like impatient fingers. Sarah Thompson adjusted the flashlight in her hand as she knelt before the dust-covered trunk. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten memories. Grandpa always said some things should stay buried, she whispered to herself, recalling his stern warning. But curiosity had won. The trunk creaked open, revealing a painting wrapped in brittle cloth. With trembling hands, Sarah peeled back the layers. The face stared back at her. A man, eyes hollow and mouth twisted in eternal agony. The brushstrokes were harsh, almost angry. Crimson streaks dripped from the figure's eyes like blood. The colors seemed to pulse in the dim light. Sarah's chest tightened. The Anguished Man, she muttered, recognizing it from an old family story. Painted with the artist's own blood, cursed by his despair. As she reached out, the flashlight flickered. The attic temperature dropped. A whisper floated from the shadows. "Why did you wake me?" The painting's eyes moved. Sarah stumbled back, heart racing. The attic door slammed shut behind her. The whisper grew louder, now a guttural growl. "He wants out!" And then the light went out. The silence in the attic was suffocating, broken only by the sound of Sarah's breath, shallow and quick. Her hands were shaking as she fumbled with the flashlight, but it refused to turn back on. The whispers intensified, as though they were circling her, pressing in from every angle. "He wants out," the voice rasped, dripping with male of energy. Sarah tried to rise, her knees buckling beneath her as the weight of an unseen force settled on her chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Panic gripped her heart. With a burst of adrenaline, she pushed herself to her feet and stumbled back toward the attic door. Her hand reached for the handle, but it was cold, like ice, and it wouldn't budge. She tried again. Nothing. The door was sealed shut. The darkness seemed to stretch, pressing in like a living entity, tightening around her throat. Then, a faint glow flickered in the corner of her vision. The painting. It was no longer just a still image. The man's face had shifted, his eyes now following her every movement. His mouth, twisted in agony, opened, and a low, guttural scream tore through the room. "You shouldn't have touched it," a voice growled, louder now, reverberating through the walls. The temperature plummeted even further, and Sarah could see her breath in front of her like fog. Desperately, she pulled at the door again. This time, it cracked open, just enough for her to squeeze through. She burst out into the hallway, heart pounding in her ears. She could still hear the whispering. "No!" The growling coming from the attic. It followed her like a shadow, and though she ran down the stairs and through the house, it didn't stop. In the living room, Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her head spinning. The painting had been cursed, a legend told for generations in her family. But now it was real, and it wanted her. Or maybe it wanted to be free. The whispering had stopped, but Sarah knew the curse had only just begun. Sarah barely slept that night, her mind racing as the memory of the painting haunted her thoughts. She had to understand what she'd unleashed. Her grandfather's warnings echoed in her mind, but it was too late now. She had touched it, and now she would have to pay the price. The next morning, she ventured into the town library, desperate to learn more about the painting and the man whose tortured face had been immortalized in it. The air in the library felt dense, as though the very walls held secrets long buried. Sarah scanned the dusty shelves, her fingers brushing across books about art, folklore, and strange happenings in the town. Finally, she found an old, leather-bound journal. It was her grandfather's. Opening the journal, she found an entry that made her blood run cold. The Anguished Man. A painting so cursed, It has destroyed everyone who's laid eyes on it for too long. It was painted by a troubled artist, one whose sanity was shattered by the darkness he saw in his own mind. But the true horror lies in the painting itself, for it contains a spirit, a man forever trapped in torment. Once it is revealed, the curse will awaken and the artist's suffering will continue, bleeding into the world of the living. Sarah's hand trembled as she turned the pages. Her grandfather had been obsessed with it, always talking about how the painting wasn't just a piece of art, it was alive. He had tried to destroy it. Many had, but each attempt had failed. In the final entry, there was a chilling sentence. The only way to stop it is to return it to where it was created, to the artist's home. If the man is freed, there will be no way to stop him. The following day, Sarah traveled to the artist's hometown, a secluded village far from the city. The road was narrow, lined with thick trees that seemed to close in on her as she drove. The village looked abandoned, but there was something about it that made her feel as though she was being watched. Sarah parked in front of a crumbling stone house, the one her grandfather had told her about. She stepped out of the car and approached the front door, which creaked open without her touching it. The air inside was stale, suffocating. As she stepped into the living room, she was hit by the overpowering stench of mildew and decay. In the corner of the room, there was a single painting on the wall, a portrait of the man she had seen. His face was still twisted in torment, but now the expression seemed to mock her, as though it recognized her. It was the same man, the one from the painting in her attic. The whispering returned. "You shouldn't have come here." Sarah froze, her heart racing. She tried to move, but her legs felt like lead. She was trapped. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as shadows danced across the floor. Suddenly his voice screamed in her ears. "You have no idea what you've awakened." The painting seemed to come alive, the man's face stretching, contorting as though the canvas itself was alive. His fingers twitched as if he were about to reach out. In a moment of sheer desperation, Sarah grabbed the journal her grandfather had left her. She flipped through the pages, looking for anything that could save her. She found the answer. The only way to stop it, the journal said, is to paint a new soul into the canvas. A soul pure enough to replace the anguish. Only then can the curse be broken. But there was a catch. Sarah realized the soul had to be one that had never known fear, one that had never been touched by darkness. And then she understood there was only one way out. She ran at the painting, her hands trembling as she pulled out a brush. She closed her eyes and painted the face of someone she loved, someone she thought she had lost long ago. The moment the brush touched the canvas, the room shook violently. The man screamed in rage, but it was too late. A bright light exploded from the canvas and Sarah collapsed to the ground, the world spinning around her. When she opened her eyes, the painting was gone. The room was empty. And as she stood there gasping for breath, she realized she had saved herself. But the question lingered in her mind. Who had she truly painted into the canvas? Truth doesn't hide. It waits, lurking in the shadows. Subscribe to my channel now and uncover the mysteries that lie beneath the surface before they find you first.